Good evening and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ+ daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live and then we're available on demand. And we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, and of course, YouTube and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Monday, January 16th, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ+ community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ+ evening news show. Whatever happens, unique in LGBTQ+ news, you will see it and hear it.
Happening Out's television network is a 501c3 nonprofit media platform in the television and radio model of PBS and NPR, but designed for our LGBTQ+ community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 37 years of the LGBTQ+ experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ+ and broader community.
Well, let's welcome anchor Elijah Manley. Elijah is a community organizer, activist, and formerly the youngest ever candidate for the Florida House of Representatives. He is the owner of Benchmark Strategies, a South Florida consulting firm. Welcome, Elijah.
Hello. Let's welcome anchor Dr. Bobby Huen. Bobby is a certified civil and family mediator. As the founder and principal mediator at BH Conflict Resolution Services, he helps families, businesses, and individuals resolve different disputes of all types. Having grown up everywhere from Hong Kong to Boston, Bobby is proud to offer a global perspective to current events. When he's not at the office or here in the It's Happening Out studio, Bobby enjoys gaming, Lego building, and hanging out on the drive. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Elijah. And now let's welcome anchor chef Josie. She is a Bravo TV top chef and the master of the popular champagne and oyster celebration restaurant Bubble and Pearls on the heart of the famous Wilton Drive. She is also known by her alter ego, DJ Lady Snack Daddy. Welcome, Chef Josie.
Hey, Bobby. I love being at this table. So next, let's welcome anchor Gregg Shapiro, an inductee into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame. Gregg is the author of 8 books, including his latest, Fear of Muses, an entertainment journalist whose celebrity interviews and music reviews run in a variety of regional LGBTQ+ and mainstream publications and websites. His movie review column called Screensaver can be found in South Florida Gay News, San Francisco's Bay Area Reporter, RottenTomatoes.com, and more. Good evening, Gregg.
Hello out there. We are the reporters for Queer News Tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ+ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast. And here are the bullet points of the Queer News for today, Monday, January 16th, 2023, Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Well, first up, we queer up South Florida and Florida. Smart Ride presents nearly $15 million as the 20th anniversary is launched. This Sunday, Smart Ride presented a check of over $1 million to 6 benefiting agencies from Smart Ride 19, and nearly $15 million in total since the event started, as the 20th anniversary is now launched for 2023. During the ceremony, a $20,000 lifeline was given to SunServe and its executive director, Tony Lima, And the pet project's Sue Martino received $15,000. The southernmost HIV/AIDS ride, aka Smart Ride, started in 2003 with a vision of giving back 100% of every dollar its participants raise to AIDS services organizations throughout Florida. Since 2003, nearly $15 million has been raised, and that was announced at the Sunday check presentation. Equally important is 100% of it is returned to help those infected, affected, or at risk at HIV/AIDS in Florida. Smart Ride is now the second largest AIDS bicycle ride in the country and the only one of its size to give back 100%. On Sunday, January 15th, the Smart Ride 19 organized a check presentation party at Hunter's Nightclub at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Happening Out Television Network took care of the successful event's production and media responsibilities, and you're going to be able to see the entire event. Big names such as Can Community Health, Sidecar Kitchen, Hunter's Nightclub, and Breakthrough Group sponsored the direct check presentation event. The ceremony started when Glenn Weinzimmer, founder of the Smart Ride, welcomed everyone. Glenn announced that he was stepping down as executive director, obviously continues as founder this year, and that he would be replaced by Todd Del May. Glenn also informed the audience about the Smart Ride 20, which will be held November 17th to 18th. Very exciting news. I did about an hour with the 6 beneficiaries, Broward House, Compass, other legacy healthcare service providers for LGBT. They all received somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 to $175,000, $180,000. So it was a great day for the check presentations. I did an hour with them to launch the Smart Ride Happening Out Ideas Festival, and we all sat down before the check presentation and talked about how Smart Ride and the 6 agencies working together were a reflection of how collaboration and cooperation works in the community, and why we don't quite see it as much in LGBT as we should from their perspective, and why we should embrace it more. And then the complete filming of the check presentation, which we're going to show you both pieces together this week. Quite exciting. The other big news besides the check presentations is we have begun Smart Ride 20, and we have made a year-long commitment where we're going to have many embracements of Smart Ride, and in conjunction with the LGBT Ideas Festival in support leading up to the November event of Smart Ride. Very important because it's its 20th anniversary. Very important because of the new executive director, Todd Del May. Very important because we finally put Grandpa in a home.
Just say that because
I won't even say his name. Right, exactly. And his goal.
You sure you ever walk into Boner again?
Yeah, exactly.
Not tonight.
Not tonight. And Grandpa's goal is a lofty one. His goal for 20th anniversary of Smart Ride is to raise $2 million. And we know that they can do it, and we're going to be helping every step of the way.
It's really good that they have Todd Del May at the helm now.
Yeah, Todd's he'll be awesome.
And it's a great way to kick off the 20th anniversary. And of course, our Queer News Tonight anchor, Glenn Weinzimmer.
Oh, you finally.
So much to be proud of and to celebrate. We love him.
Yeah. Grandpa.
Oh.
Wait. It's time for bed.
No, and listen, you know, $2 million is nothing for our community. Let's be honest. We can raise that with our eyes closed. It just means that everyone's going to have to reach into their pockets. If you told 10 of your friends, you told 10 of your friends, and everyone we know. And Glenn's been doing this for a long time, so I love that he's conservative about his goal.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Well, hopefully we can all dig into our pockets. Just a $10 donations for each person inside Wilton Manors. We can hit that goal pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Instead of the drinks on the drive, you could take one of those drinks and invest it in this work.
Hey.
No, $10 2 drinks.
No.
Where's
Yeah.
Yeah, where are you drinking?
Two beers at Lidl is $10.
All right. We're going to talk about trans rights now.
Okay, so next up, we're going to queer up trans rights. A new study shows that trans populations doubled in 5 years and is now more than 5 million. A new survey shows roughly 1.6% of American adults are now transgender or non-binary. That number is higher still among young adults, with 5% of people under 30 now identifying their gender as different from the one assigned to them at birth. The growing visibility of transgender and non-binary people comes amid rising societal acceptance and new efforts to count the populations. One landmark study found 1.2 million non-binary people in the 18 to 60 age range. Of that total, 3/4 were under 30, which suggests Generation Z has explored gender identity to the extent that older Americans have not. Kay Simon, 28, an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota who studies the experiences of queer youth and their families, says, quote, "We have a world in which we are finally counting these groups. You can't identify as something if you don't know what the word is," end quote. A 2022 report from the Williams Institute, a research center at the University of California, Los Angeles, estimates that 1.3% of adults aged 18 to 24 and 1.4% of 13 to 17-year-olds are transgender, with a gender identity different than the one assigned at birth. Teens and young adults are much more likely to be transgender than older adults. I think the survey is a very encouraging sign. I think people are finally coming out of their shell and proudly declaring who they are, and that's encouraging. On the other hand, that means that the reactionary forces that are coming against us are now getting stronger than ever. People without education, without exposure, they, these people, some of them are not knowledgeable of LGBT, the T in the LGBT, because they're unfamiliar. Some of them are marking them as targets for abuse and harassment and discrimination, because that's now an easier target than the LGBT community as a whole.
Right. Well, the, quote, rising social acceptance, end quote, aside, this story is just the kind of thing to make our buddy Tucker Carlson and his evil twin sister, Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's going to make their heads spin like dreidels. I mean, this is really going to tick them off.
Well, I mean, and with good reason, okay? With good reason. When you think about the older generation, and that study is showing that, the younger generation is the one who is exploring sexuality. The older generation, this is not a conversation. They don't even know what we're talking about. And for those of us that are set somewhere in the middle, and I'm in that Generation X, that bridge generation from you guys, right? But what happened there is that we started to understand sexuality and started to explore that other level, that other layer, right? What's concerning for probably the elder generation, who are the ones who are sitting in legislative positions, okay, they're thinking that what we've done up to this point is what is opening that space for that expression. And so you see everything even in a governmental perspective, from a governmental perspective, where the belt is tightening, and they're like, wait a minute, we've been giving society too much freedom to express themselves. So this is going to be that transitional period, because we're stepping into the space of the unknown. And when you're in the unknown, there's unknown from every angle.
And you say it nicer than I would say it, because you sit in an environment of saying the unknown. Let me put it in a different perspective. It's in the space of ignorance. And the issue of what we watch in gender identity, trans, non-binary association, baby boomers, which I'm in the category of, have the least acceptance of LGBT, although the number is still good. but the least in all of the major generational categories. And the younger you get, the higher it goes. It's the same issue with trans. And the problem with what we watch from the Tucker Carlson set or the Ron DeSantis set or the Texas Governor Abbott set is ignorance allows you to put your head in the sand and say, I'm going to pretend what's going on in society is not going on. I will legislate with my head in the sand and assume that I'm going to pass laws and make everyone participate in the way that I want them to participate. But when they do that, they're legislating in fear. And ultimately, they're like the little Dutch boy. They can put their finger in the dike, but they can't do it forever. And sooner or later, there's going to be a break and the flood walls are going to happen. That's what we're watching. That's what this study reflects.
And it's intentional too. I don't even think it's ignorance. I think they know exactly what they're doing. They understand this probably more than a lot of people. I think it's intended to harm.
No, I think it's extremely willful. The ignorance is extremely willful. And also, I think I remember reading something about this, that, you know, as my generation, millennials, I mean, I'm oldest of the millennial, but I'm around their age, they are expecting that generation voters to become more and more conservative. And what they are noticing is that it's not happening. The cultural war the cultural war that is waged against LGBTQ people are not going to entice the millennials from voting conservative. They're actually increasingly sticking to what they've grown up with, which is liberal acceptance.
And at the end of the day, I think we've learned from the midterm elections, the Republicans' great disappointment. They took the House, but there's great disappointment in the Republican circles and at Fox News. There's great disappointment. And I think we watched two parallel paths over the last 2 years. The natural reaction that flows out of Donald Trump and his loss, and what's happened over the last 2 years is linked together. The issue of woke thinking, which is phrased in whichever positive or negative way that you want to use it, and LGBTQ rights, and very specifically trans rights, they're all interrelated. And frankly, women's decision-making of their own health care, it's all interrelated. They're all intersectional. And it's a reflection of older white men trying to desperately hold on to a world that they feel is falling apart. It's slipping through their fingers, as opposed to going, no, it isn't. It's just, this has always been here. Black issues have always been here. Women's issues have always been here. LGBT issues have always been here. And there's always been trans people. And the quicker that we can get into conversations where we can accept that and talk about how we can be better with those facts, the better we're going to be. Or you can be Ron DeSantis and Governor Abbott. And whether it's civil rights for people of color, or women's reproductive rights, or LGBT or trans rights, it's really all the same thing. And that's the reason why they're going to lose. Because at the end of the day, you might be able to continue to hold my demographic of baby boomers, but you cannot hold millennials. And you for sure cannot hold Gen Zers. There's no way you're going to. It's not going to happen. Exactly. So the study is reflective of it. It means that it's going to get worse because older white men are going to get more and more scared, and they're going to fight harder and harder. And then eventually they're going to age out, as it's called. Right. I said it nicer. Die off. I'm living forever, Greg. Just living forever.
Okay, well, next up, we queer up LGBTQ plus civil rights. LGBTQ plus celebrates MLK Day and surprising facts about the civil rights icon. As America paused to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, experts say his fight against poverty and inequality is still just as relevant today as it was during the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. Here are 10 little-known facts about the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 1. The famous I Have a Dream speech was improvised. Halfway through his speech in 1963, gospel singer Mahalia Jackson shouted, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." That prompted Martin to pivot to a sermon he had previously delivered. Number 2, the birth name of MLK was actually Michael King, but his father changed his own name and the King's name to Martin Luther King. Number 3, King decided at college to become a preacher. Number 4, in his 13 years as a civil rights leader, King was arrested 30 times, largely for misdemeanors and civil protest violations, according to the King Center. Number 5, according to the King Center, King wrote 5 books throughout his lifetime and published numerous collections of his letters and sermons. Number 6, he was a big fan of Lieutenant Nyota Uhura in Star Trek, played by Nichelle Nichols, and convinced her not to abandon the iconic role when she was planning to quit. Number 7, he survived previous assassination attempts. Number 8, King's mother, Alberta, was also assassinated. Number 9, the King family paid for the popular actress Julia Roberts' birth. And last but not least, did you know that he was 39 years old when he was killed? I thought it was at least a little older. But
Yeah.
39. Wow.
What does MLK mean to you? You represent community tonight here at the table. MLK Day, it's important?
I know there's a effort out there to make it seem like it's not an important day anymore, but to me, it's still important. Not only was Dr. King responsible for a lot of the rights that we have now, and I wish the younger generation would pay more attention, read more, and understand that this wasn't too long ago when Dr. King was alive and the civil rights movement happened. I have grandparents who are alive, but there were consequences, and we need to learn about that and understand what that means, even though there's a push to whitewash history or erase history. And while this day is important to me, just waking up today and going online and seeing all of the conservatives who tweet out Dr. King's quotes and he said this and he said that, while they're 100% going against everything he stood for. And to me, that's just hypocritical.
Yeah, hypocritical. I know you're Gen Z. How old are you?
24.
You're 24 years old. It might surprise you, it might not surprise you. Back starting in high school, for me, the discussion of a national holiday began and into college. And MLK, a national federal holiday, was not popular. If it would have been left to an American vote, I'm very sure that we would have voted no as Americans. First and foremost, because the people that should have a national holiday like this probably wouldn't vote, and they wouldn't turn up at the polls, just like what we have watched at midterms and other times. But it required a legislative push of a House and a Senate and a president that said, this is important. Even if the majority of Americans do not think so, it is important in terms of the representation for the Black African American community in America. And so thank goodness that they had the strength of will to say, it doesn't have to be decided by a majority. We are a representative democracy, and so as a result, that's how we get an MLK Day. One other thing that I think is really interesting in terms of what King did, were you a Star Trek watcher?
I was not.
Okay.
You're going to have to talk to my mom.
And this is why, very likely, I'm not going to speak for you, 24-year-old, the Gen Zers at the table, it's really important that we talk about our history, because the representation of your face at this story for LGBT in Queer News Tonight, Dr. King is referring to Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek. I was fanatical as a very young kid for Star Trek. And in the 1960s, when I'm watching Star Trek, a Lieutenant Uhura was a face that you did not see on television. Wait, what's going on here? And in 1966, when she kissed William Shatner, the captain of the Enterprise, it's like you could hear the matches of implosion going on in places like Birmingham, Alabama. And
it was like the 90s when there was like the first same-sex kiss on network television.
Yes, and when MLK is encouraging her, don't quit this show because your representation is as valuable as my voice. That's what he's talking about in terms of history.
Well, and King's birthday is also the perfect time to acknowledge the contributions of Bayard Rustin.
Yes.
As you may recall, Rustin was the openly gay Black civil rights activist that South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond called a, quote, communist, draft dodger, and homosexual, unquote. But he was also one of the leaders of the 1963 March on Washington and did many other things.
And he also wrote a lot of King's speeches.
Right,
so
that's right.
When people ask me what does MLK Day mean to me, that means representation, because the person behind MLK
Was gay?
Was gay.
Totally
Was a black
out,
person.
and he was
So that's
out.
important.
We've talked about this before. King doesn't have a lot of public record on LGBT, but it is impossible to assume that he was rejective of it because of Bayard Rustin. It's impossible. We know when the person generally is gay. Martin Luther King knew Bayard Rustin was who Bayard Rustin was. And still kept and pulled him close. One other thing that I want to point out, go ahead.
No, actually, I really want to do this because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is also, I want to give a shout out to my alma mater, Boston University, because that's where he got his doctorate at the School of Theology. So that's what I want to say. Go Terriers. Okay, keep going.
So Bayard Rustin has this dramatic effect on the March of Washington. To me, one of the most interesting facts outside, Bayard Rustin is the super interesting fact to me. Obviously, being a baby boomer white gay man, that's of interest. But what's super interesting is King's speech. Many academic scholars say if there is 5 speeches in the history of the American Republic, that is one of the 5 speeches. And what's so interesting about that is I'm a huge fan of the West Wing. And one of the big stories in the West Wing is the speech writer, the press secretary, how important words are, that you spend so much time crafting every single syllable and word in a speech, because it lives forever, especially now with the internet, and it is designed to motivate to the conclusion that you want. What's so interesting about MLK's speech of "I Have a Dream" is Mahalia is basically saying, Martin, you're really screwing up here in front of 1 million people here on the Washington Mall. Change it up. And I went back when I learned this and watched the speech, and you can see it. I encourage you, go back and watch King's speech of "I Have a Dream." He's doing a speech that is great. Okay, it's great. I mean, come on. It's Martin Luther King. But then there is an intention stop, and then there's a change. You watch him change course in that moment live. And then he draws on previous exploration and ideas of "I have a dream to get to that mountaintop, and I might not be with you." And everybody goes, well, and I'm just speaking from my seat. That's the only seat I'm speaking from. Everybody goes, oh, he was prophetic. He knew he was going to be killed, whatever it was. No, it wasn't. He was being encouraged to be authentic. You're not being authentic. And this is your opportunity. And it is genius, because it becomes one of the academia says one of the 5 greatest speeches in the history of the American Republic, all done with no written words. Genius.
60s was a great type of speeches. I mean, we also got JFK. That's not what the country can do for you, etc. Oh my God.
But not only this, that little fun fact about Julia Roberts. I'm a Julia Roberts fan, okay? I didn't know that his family paid for her birth. I didn't know that. I mean, how old am I now? And how is that information not, there's a connection there. I'm like, I knew I loved her for a reason.
Yeah.
One last thing. There's a saying behind every man is a powerful woman. I say behind every black leader is a powerful woman, but also a powerful black gay man as well.
Yeah,
a black person.
Absolutely. It's and you said the last word, because we got to go to Josie. She's jonesing for the next story. The sad thing to me is that is the power and disappointment of black church in America, because black church is at the absolute pinnacle of trying to stop that. You can't. You can't keep your finger in the dike forever. Eventually, there's going to be a break. But to your point of black gay men that are in the choir in the churches,
Leading the choir.
leading the choir, maybe singing in the choir, showing the drama. You know, I go to all kinds of churches and I go, gosh, I wish it could be a great black church that I'm watching. Those are gay people that are doing that in the church. So, you know, it's a shame. But things will improve because we believe in Martin Luther King's dream.
Yes, we do. So now we're gonna queer up the world view. Ukraine's Zelenskyy at Golden Globes declares freedom means support for LGBTQ plus rights. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy, in a virtual Golden Globes appearance, made a broad reference to LGBTQ plus and intersex rights in his country. Mystic River's Sean Penn introduced Zelenskyy saying, quote, "If the freedom to dream was a spear, I proudly present a human being who tonight represents that spear's most honed tip," end quote. The message from the Ukrainian president comes nearly a year since Russian forces invaded the country in February of 2022. Zelenskyy started by explaining the impact the Golden Globes had when it was created, honoring achievements in filmmaking in 1943, which was during World War II. He then finished his message, which was met with a round of applause by the audience, adding that there will not be a third world war. And on a positive note, and a positive and powerful note, he talked about the hopes of winning the war with Russia. Ukrainian lawmakers last December unanimously approved a media regulation bill that bans hate speech and incitement based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Zelenskyy, less than a week later, traveled to D.C. Last summer, Zelenskyy said he supports a civil partnership law for same-sex couples. He also showed support for the Kiev Pride held last year. Wow, what a tumultuous time. And what courage for a man whose country is under constant bombardment and attack. The weight he's carrying for the Ukraine, for the people of Ukraine. I mean, for him to still be able to dig deep and see the hope and still be thinking outwardly, thinking about our community, like this is, I mean, that's where you distinguish leaders and extraordinary leaders.
And you don't have that leadership in Russia right now.
No, not at all. And also, bear in mind that Zelenskyy was he was an actor.
Yes.
He wasn't a professional politician. It would be the equivalent of like if everyone watched West Wing and liked them so much that we elected Martin Sheen for president.
I mean, we had Ronald Reagan. He was.
Reagan was an actor, but Reagan was already running for governor. He was already governor before he became president. I mean, this guy literally jumped from acting to president.
Yeah, so
he was great. He's an inspirational leader. He knows how to work the optics. He knows how to actually speak to the people. It's extraordinary. He is like a great political mind that's trapped in a comedian's body.
And we're not surprised, of course, the Republicans. They just blew a few gaskets. They were apoplectic. These are just the most unfeeling, insensitive people, I think, in history.
Please permit me, at least from my perspective, my seat, to connect the dots. We have 3 regions in the world that are having the most difficult time to the progress that LGBT has experienced, certainly in the 21st century, since 2000. Remember George Bush and what he did. He won a presidential campaign with a culture war against LGBT. He regrets that today. He has talked about that, and we've seen so much progress over the last 22 years. We have a long way to go, but we've seen a lot of progress. But there are 3 regions in the world that are not seeing anything like the progress that we're seeing in Western Europe and in North America especially. And that is Africa and tremendously terrible things that are going on in the conservative Middle East, Muslim governments, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, etc. But the third reason why this story is really important is because Slavic nations in Eastern Europe and Russian gened nations. This is unusual. Around Ukraine, Russia and Putin, Poland, Hungary, Belarus, all are fanatically anti-LGBT. Either if you're in a democratic country like Poland and Hungary, they're coming at it in one way. Belarus and Russia are just coming at it with the sword. But they're both pursuing the exact same conclusion. And around them, and sitting in the middle of that is this leader of Ukraine. So Zelenskyy is doing something that is highly unusual. One other note that I think is super interesting. There's been progress going on in Ukraine. Ukraine historically has not, they're Slavic and Russian influence, which means, what does that mean for LGBT? Bad.
Very bad.
This is improvement. And why is the improvement going on? I believe him in his speech that he did for the Golden Globes. His speech says, in the understanding of what I've experienced now for a near year, and really what's been going on for the last 5 or 6 years because of the Crimea invasion, etc., is freedom means freedom for everyone.
Yes.
That is an exact quote. What he is saying when he adds the sentence definitions is, wait, our freedom is under attack. And now I have clear understanding of what that means for marginalized peoples, that their freedoms are under attack. And that includes LGBT.
Right, all means all.
All means all.
Yeah.
And that increases the stakes for winning the war against Russia.
It absolutely does.
The
And
US has to fund Ukraine.
It absolutely does,
100%.
because it's a representation of freedom means freedom for all. One other thing. Go ahead.
No, but also I want to point out that there was a very good opportunity for Zelenskyy to expand the civil rights conversation, because in Ukraine, where the Orthodox Church used to reign supreme, the Ukrainian Orthodox now split from Russian Orthodox. The Russian Orthodox Church, which was dominant, is now being seen as with high suspicion because they were sticking to Putin's talking points. I mean, the Metropolitan, in other words, the Russian Orthodox Pope in Moscow is a direct Putin fanboy. Rah rah Putin.
Very
rah, rah,
anti-gay, yeah.
So when it comes to Ukrainians, it's now think of it as the rejection of the Russian church and say, you know what? You don't like gays? We're gonna like gays. Bite me.
You know, one final thought that I'll tell everybody, and we're optimistic. We're very optimistic. But we have been repeatedly discussing the possibility of doing the first LGBT interview for America with President Zelenskyy.
Yes. That'd be amazing.
Fingers crossed.
And now we're going to queer up entertainment. Ezra Miller, The Flash, pleads guilty to burglary. According to a new report from Deadline, the embattled The Flash star has entered a plea deal ahead of their upcoming burglary trial in Vermont. While Ezra Miller had originally pleaded not guilty to felony burglary charges, they have now entered a guilty plea to the lesser charge of trespassing. Miller was accused of breaking into a neighbor's house and stealing 3 bottles of alcohol in the summer of 2022. They had previously been arrested in Hawaii for disorderly conduct and harassment. According to Deadline, Miller will be forced to pay a $500 fine and serve 1 year on administrative probation. The statement by Miller's attorney, Lisa Shulkrot, on behalf of the actor on January 13th, says, quote, Ezra Miller pled guilty this morning to a misdemeanor unlawful trespass in Vermont Superior Court and accepted the conditions imposed by the court. Ezra would like to thank the community and the court for their trust and patience throughout this process, and would once again like to acknowledge the love and support they have received from their family and friends who continue to be a vital presence in their ongoing mental health, end quote. While at one point it seemed certain that Miller would be fired from his role as the Flash, things aren't so clear anymore. I don't know if people remember this, but Miller starred alongside gay filmmaker Derek Jarman's muse Tilda Swinton in the 2011 movie We Need to Talk About Kevin as the titular troubled teen, and now a dozen years or so later, we find ourselves needing to talk about Ezra. Hashtag wallflower no more.
He couldn't knock on the door and just ask for the as a walker. Like
It's such a strange story, isn't it? I mean, think about, he stars along with Henry Cavill as Superman. Imagine Henry Cavill as Superman breaking into some house for 3 bottles of liquor.
I'm seeing the show right now. It's strange though too. I mean, it speaks right into the mental health. But I mean, and that's another conversation. But I don't want to even get into how mental health has become a crutch in the country. But I know I'll get burned for that one. But anyways, what we're talking about here though with this kid, a lot of actors, they tend to when they get into character and they start to develop that character, some of those traits stay with them. And it's clear, like, what are you, just being a rebel right now? I mean, I'm sure that role in Flash paid you enough that you could probably afford a couple of bottles, okay? But it just doesn't make sense. So that's a louder cry for help, I think. And I'm glad that his friends and his family are there.
And to your point about you become this character and you take a lot of the characteristics of the character with you. I don't know if Miller was thinking that he could move at lightning speed, but if
Another good one.
he would have gotten away with the crime. He's not the Flash. So as a result, dude, buy your bottles of liquor like all of us do at the store.
Uber Eats.
Right.
Postmates. Listen, it's inflation, desperate times.
That's very strange story.
I'm with you, Ezra.
All right. Well, and now we are going to queer up education. 13-year-old boy commits suicide after homophobic bullying. Just one of 3,500 LGBTQ+ that do so. A 13-year-old boy in France named Lucas died by suicide last Saturday, January 7th, after facing anti-LGBTQ bullying at the school. People close to his family says the school did little to stop the bullying. The French magazine Tattoo reports that the students at the Louis Armand de Gaulle Middle School in Vosges department was out as a member of the LGBTQ+ community. As per a family friend, quote, he was constantly harassed for the way he dressed, his mannerisms, his presence. He didn't hide himself, and that bothered some people. He was always pleasant, caring, spontaneous, full of dreams and alive, end quote. Valerie de Trasmit, the Academic Services Director for the National Education System in the Vosges Department, said in a radio interview, quote, there's really a lot of emotion from adults who didn't see that Lucas wasn't doing well recently, end quote. De Trasmit said that Lucas and his mother reported homophobic insults since the start of the school year in September at a parent-teacher meeting. She claimed, quote, for us at this point, the situation had been resolved. Lucas said that things were working themselves out and that he was no longer being insulted at school, end quote. However, Stephanie contradicted de Trasmit's claim and said that Lucas complained, quote, again and again and again. His mother asked for help several times. The school where he spent 3/4 of his time didn't react, end quote. And that is just terrible. First, that woman needs to be fired. That woman, whoever the academic supervisor is, that woman needs to be disciplined. She failed on the job, and now a child is dead. She failed. She failed to monitor the situation. She failed to assign staff to monitor the situation. She failed a young man because of her blindness to the situation. I won't say willful blindness because we don't know what she was thinking. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she was just incompetent. Does anybody
think it's interesting? France is generally considered across the board, from the first page of the book to the last page of the book, better than the United States in LGBT and how society accepts LGBTQ community embracement, etc. Does it surprise you that something like this is going on in schools, even in France?
It's a shock.
Yeah, it is.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, bigotry is everywhere. Just because a country tends to be more liberal doesn't mean, Broward County is liberal doesn't mean that homophobia doesn't occur.
No, but you know what? Listen, let's get deeper into it. So when you know, because we think about France and we think, oh yes, you know, it's expressive, it's artsy, it's of course a little LGBT, of course, and everything, right? Art is queer, but when we think about kids that age, 13. It's not necessarily if you're LGBT that gets you bullied. I mean, you could be a different color. You could be a girl you could be a girl. You could be a girl who acts like a boy. You could be, you know, who likes to play boy sports. I know that one. But, you know, there's a lot of different things that you get bullied on. And so as educators, you know, I think it's every educator that they really need to learn how to help. We need to be promoting kindness in the world. And we need to stop that, like nip it in the bud, like right away. It is not just them. It's not just the educator. The responsibility doesn't just fall. When you're a parent and your child is coming home every single day saying he's getting bullied, where do you stop as a parent protecting your child? And so I think about the whole scene, the whole scenario, and it's unfortunate because now there's a young boy who lost his life.
He was so young, that picture. And I mean, it's not just the parents of the kids bullied, it's the parents of the bullies. What are these people doing to stop their children from behaving this way? And it's really sad to think that we're at the beginning of 2023, and here we have this queer teen suicide. It's really terrifying to imagine what the rest of the year is going to hold for the most vulnerable in our community.
I was just going to say everything you guys said, but also a lot of people, I mean, I want to see what all of the facts end up being. I don't want to put the impetus just on the administrators, the parents. Like he said, they have a responsibility to make sure that they're raising their kids to be that way. Because I know France is generally a tolerant country, but kids are kids, and they have to be raised.
I'm curious. You're the closest to teenage years. Did you ever think about suicide?
I have.
Yeah. And how did you get through it?
I had supporting friends and a family that was generally supporting, so that did help. And there were a lot of teachers that really saved me.
Teachers in school?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm so concerned about what they're trying to do at our schools right now.
Yeah, and this was the point. I want to give production a heads up. In a moment, if possible, not yet, I want you to put up Luke's picture in full screen, well, without me, but just in a moment. One of the things that's really important in this story that we didn't tell in the story, which is really important, is that LGBTQ, especially youth, are dramatically more susceptible to the possibility of thinking about suicide, attempting suicide, whether they're successful or not, and committing suicide. Percentage-wise, the number is dramatically greater than broad community, general population community. And there's one reason why. And the reason is because whether children mean to be homophobic or not, I think Josie hits it right on the head. Children are children, and the way that they begin to learn and express is to battle each other. Right or wrong, it's probably wrong, but at the end of the day, that's it. And being gay is just an easy tactic. Being a girl and being gravitating towards sports is just an easy tactic. And as a result, that leads to the constant bullying that takes place in school among young people, and LGBT is just at the top of the pyramid of the attack that's going to be formulated, whether they mean it or not. It doesn't make any difference. And the issue of homophobia is not the issue. The issue is that they're young. And that's why, and we didn't say it, but I want to call it out, the Trevor Project. There are suicide hotlines. You can call the Trevor Project 24 hours a day and talk. Elijah just said, I thought about suicide and I got through it because of teachers that are willing and helped me in terms of guidance of talking about what the problem is. And so therefore, many, many people are like Elijah. He is sitting at this table.
It gets better.
It gets better, exactly. Another organization. Now let's put up Luke's picture if we can. Luke's picture, look at this picture and just stare at this picture a moment. This could be, and now granted, he's in France. He's not with us today. This could be any kid in America, anywhere in America. Look, and in his eyes, and that smile, and that kind of silly haircut, and those glasses, that could be any American queer kid in America. And you know what's really sad about this? I hope, there's not a chance in the world of this hope coming true, but I hope as we show this full picture, Ron DeSantis is looking right in this kid's eyes. Because let me connect the dots of what we just learned. It's not a question of homophobia. It's not a question of gender identity. It's not a question of your sexuality. It's a question of being a kid. And when you pass a destructive law like Don't Say Gay to tell teachers you can't speak, you're putting all of your kids in school, just like look at Luke's eyes, you put them at risk. Because you lose all of the safety support that Luke needed to stop. Not a question of homophobia, perhaps, but just the simple bullying, where Luke goes home every single day going, God, I don't know if I can go back to school tomorrow because I'm going to be attacked over and over and over again. And then unfortunately, look into Luke's eyes, he makes a decision, I won't deal with this anymore. And there's no teacher in Florida that can intercede to stop it. Because I would have to talk about Luke's gender identity or his sexuality. Ron DeSantis, you help contribute to this situation.
Adult bully.
It's an adult bully. It's tragic. And what we're watching in Florida and in our schools, thank you, and what we're watching is tragic. This is the consequence of what we're going to see over Don't Say Gay in Florida.
Wow. Next up, we queer up South Florida and Florida. Central Florida man carried out harassment campaign against gay neighbors.
Here's another look at that suspect, Frank Norville. Neighbors told us he's caused all kinds of problems around here for quite a few years. And as you mentioned, the love on the door, you can see it's also written on this motorhome right back here. And apparently he has not been showing that, though, to his next door neighbors. In a small neighborhood near Lake Eustis, there is one face that neighbors told us they don't want to see anywhere near them. He harasses everybody?
Everybody.
Alfred actually admitted he has a criminal record himself, but he said Frank Norville is someone who is constantly causing problems throughout the neighborhood. Norville was arrested 2 years ago for smashing out neighbors' car windows and was just arrested for aggravated stalking with a hate crime enhancement. Norville lives in this home with all the warning signs to keep out, masks on the fence, and a motorhome covered in graffiti. But deputies say he was harassing his gay neighbors next door.
A Florida man has been arrested for allegedly harassing a gay couple who lived next to him, even going so far as to menace their children. According to deputies with the Lake County Sheriff's Office, Frank Norville, 57 of Leesburg, Florida, is accused of harassing his neighbors and their children as part of a months-long campaign, shining lights on them and shouting anti-gay slurs at them while he stood along their fence, dividing their properties, or passed by on a bicycle. Other instances of Norville's harassment included allegedly screaming, "It's not Adam and Steve," at his neighbors while repeatedly squeaking a rubber chicken. Norville also allegedly threatened one of the couple's children, telling the young boy that he would kill the family cat and eat it with teriyaki sauce. When the boy objected, the man told him to shut up and suggested he perform sex acts on his parents. According to Orlando area CBS affiliate WKMG, the neighbors filed a stalking complaint against Norville due to that repeated harassment, which they claim was due to their sexual orientation. That led a court to grant 2 temporary injunctions against Norville, stating that he could not come within 10 feet of the couple's vehicles. But the day after the injunction was granted, Norville allegedly violated the court order. According to the news website Raw Story, Norville is currently being held without bail in the lead up to a preliminary hearing. Well, that's quite an interesting story. That's all I can
That's
say.
a Florida man story.
Well, the brain trust known as the Vile Frank Norville pulled out that golden oldie, Adam and Steve. That's so original. And now that he's being held without bail, he may get to have his own Adam and Steve experience.
Oh, dear.
And as if
Oh, dear.
that's not enough,
Oh,
he's
dear.
too stupid to know that it's mole or Thai chili sauce that's the preferred dipping sauce for cats, not teriyaki.
What did the cat do to him? Was the cat gay? Like,
I mean, you need the herbal elements.
You know, this is so gay. Gay, even as terrible as this story is, we can find the humor.
We can find the humor. But the reality of it is this is a miserable man. And there's a lot of miserable human beings out there. And it's unfortunate when their misery bleeds into the community. And, you know, there's help for people like that, or there's not. And so how do we, when we're fighting constantly as an LGBTQ community, how do we promote acceptance when we can't accept the miserable? So it's about safety, obviously. When you're talking to my kids, I'm going to have a response. And when you're threatening to eat my cat and dip it in teriyaki sauce, I'm going to have a response. Okay. When you're harassing me and my family, look, you can keep your misery on that side of the fence, and that's fine. But I'm all about standing for acceptance, and that includes those miserable people. But the moment that they step over the fence, that's when we get into the problems.
You know, I completely agree with your summary there. One thing that I would say before we move on is I love the fact that they were holding him without bail, because that is an indication that the judge says there is a clear and present danger here, whether it be mental, whatever it might be. There's a clear and present danger. I wish that that's what would have happened in Colorado Springs. I really don't see a lot of difference in this man, in the threats of what he is doing, and what happened in Colorado Springs, because moving this situation to add a gun to it is a very real world situation. The other thing that I want to point out that is disturbing to me, and constantly I get the knock, you're just attacking religion. I am not. I am a person of faith, and I go to church, so it's not a question of knocking religion. But when he does the slur, it's not Adam and Steve, while I do not forgive him for saying it, I do not make him the culprit of why he is saying it. He has learned this in church. He probably doesn't even go to church. He is probably not really even religious, but he's heard somewhere along the lines of Adam and Eve, and he grew up in a situation where mommy and daddy forced him in a horrible situation of going to where he's at in Leesburg in Central Florida, to a very conservative Southern Baptist or even evangelical church, and it pounded him and pounded him and pounded him, and he remembered Adam and Eve. And so as a result, he makes the slur, it's not Adam and Steve. Okay, perhaps we give him the pass. But the radical religion in America is contributing to situations like this that radicalize people's thoughts about trans, about LGBT, about black people, and about women's reproductive rights. They're all intersected together, flowing out of radical evangelical church. Mr. Noviel, perhaps we can forgive you, but the judge is indicating there's really a dangerous situation going on with you, and perhaps you should be listening to what that judge is telling you.
Next, we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral's Sunday International service at 10:30 a.m. with more than 30,000 watching every week.
I'm Gabe Salazar, Artistic Director of the Gay Men's Chorus of South Florida, and Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church.
Well, we continue tonight's queer news headlines with a segment we call LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. In LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News, let's queer up entertainment from LGBTQ plus news partner Deadline and writer Matt Grabar. Here's the details on Patrick Brice's queer horror film Party and Pray. Legendary Entertainment and Aftershock Media have closed a deal for a feature adaptation of the latter's graphic novel, Party and Pray, from creators Steve Orlando and Steve Fox. In a competitive situation with each other, Patrick Brice has been tapped to direct from a script by Robert Foreman. Published in 2021, it tells the story of Alan, a wealthy older gay man who meets a confident and attractive young man named Scott at a nightclub. Their chemistry leads them to end up at Alan's house, where the men's dark secrets are laid bare and they have a night together neither of them expected. You can read more about this at deadline.com.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up education. From LGBTQ plus news partner, Extra Magazine, and writer Sarah Prager. Meet the LGBTQ plus creative force behind banned book Queer Books Bus across America.
Hi, I'm Eric, queer author and historian.
And I'm Adam, dancer and marketing expert. And I'm Aubergine, the social media intern here at shopqueer.co.
Growing up, I always looked forward to my favorite day of the year, the Scholastic Book Fair.
We'd get to leave class and enter a magical space. We'd exchange bullies for wizards, dragons, and fairy tales. And just imagine if those books had characters like us, showing that queerness itself is magical.
Now those books exist, and bigots are targeting their authors.
And that's why we're starting an independent bookshop that splits its profits with queer authors.
And although we can't afford a brick and mortar location quite yet,
with your help, we can start something even better.
We're launching a fundraiser to buy a school bus and convert it into a traveling queer bookshop and book fair.
All those towns banning queer books? Get ready, the Rainbow Book Bus is coming to you.
At Shop Queer Book Fairs, we'll spark important conversations and give away books to those who need them most.
Queer books can change lives, and with your help, we can get them into as many hands as possible.
With LGBTQ2S plus books under attack in the U.S. at record rates, author Eric Cervini and his boyfriend, actor Adam Powell, knew they wanted to take action. While others are organizing protests, drag queen story hours, days of reading, and other important acts of resistance, Cervini and Powell have their own spin on what to contribute to the movement, and that spin has wheels. The pair are working on buying, then building, what they call the Rainbow Book Bus, a book mobile carrying queer and trans books to small towns. Read more at extramagazine.com.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up education. From LGBTQ plus news partner, LGBTQ Nation, and writer Molly Sprayregan. Watch Idaho's school board meeting descend into chaos over LGBTQ plus rights.
I would like to call Senator Chris Trinkle, if you may come up, please. You could state your name, sir, and your address.
Before my time starts, I want to just address the rules that you guys put forward. For instance, you said you can't criticize employees or anything like that. The Supreme Court ruled back in 1983 that any government public forum, which this is an official forum, anybody can say whatever they want, and that includes, and they specifically said this in the case, criticizing school district employees and the board. So by telling them you can't, you're violating all these people's First Amendment rights.
Sir?
That's how it goes. So my name's Chris Trinkle. I live at 2019 Fairview Avenue. First, I want to talk about policy 2520 about the curriculum. I'm hoping it's just some oversight, but in there, according to Idaho Law 33-512, one half of the curriculum committee has to be made up by parents, not a quarter.
An Idaho school board meeting devolved into chaos on Monday night while a Republican state senator was virulently speaking out against a proposed policy to protect LGBTQ+ students in the district. The proposed Caldwell School Board policy seeks to prevent discrimination against LGBTQ+ students by, among other things, allowing them to use the locker rooms and bathrooms that align with their lived gender, requiring teachers and other staff to use their preferred names and pronouns, and allowing same-sex couples to attend dances and other activities. According to KTVB, most speakers were there to advocate against implementing the policy, but 3 students spoke out in favor of it. Read more at lgbtqnation.com.
Next, we discover how we're changing the world. It's a segment we call the Gay Agenda.
In the Gay Agenda, we clear up business. Twitter is imploding and now will increase 280 character limits to 4,000. Twitter CEO Elon Musk has confirmed that the microblogging platform will increase the tweet character limit from 280 characters to 4,000. This isn't the first time the billionaire has stated that Twitter will increase its character count. In November, Musk answered a similar inquiry by tweeting that expanding Twitter's character limit was on the to-do list. This was about a 1,000 character cap rather than the more recently proposed limits of 4,000. It looks as though Twitter is likely to get a significant character count increase in the future. Will it be better for the LGBTQ+ community or otherwise?
In the Gay Agenda, we queer up trans rights. The list will surprise you on celebrities who identify as non-binary. As the media embraces more representation and the concept of gender is more widely and accurately discussed, more and more people are now comfortable revealing their true selves. As time changes, even celebrities are changing. They are no longer afraid of breaking out of a mold society has set for them. This includes non-binary celebrities who never identified with any mold in the first place. This list includes Courtney Stodden, Ruby Rose, Jonathan Van Ness, Lachlan Watson, Asia Kate Dillon, Demi Lovato, Angel Hayes, Sam Smith, Amanla Stenberg, Nico Tortorella, Shakina Nafek, Sarah Ramirez, Bridget Lundy Payne, and Leo Tipton.
In the Gay Agenda, we queer up drag culture. Robin Fierce and Amethyst broke up right before RuPaul Drag Race Season 15. A new video was released in the first few minutes of Episode 3 of Drag Race Season 15. After reading Irene Dubois' mirrored lipstick message, the queens sit down on the sofa to decompress and talk about what just happened. It's pointed out that Robin Fierce revealed she had a relationship with Amethyst prior to the season, but the 2 queens are pretty shy to talk about it at first. This is the first time something like this has happened in the 15 seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race. Fierce explains that they came to a mutual decision for breaking up, but Amethyst notes that it was more of her decision to part ways.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ+ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ+ evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ+ news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple Television, Android Television, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ+ digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ+ stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out, Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ+ reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Elijah Manley, Dr. Bobby Huen, Chef Josie, and Gregg Shapiro. We will see you daily at 8 p.m. And to our LGBTQ+ world, we wish you
Good night.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.